Welcome to Ahead of the Game, a podcast brought to you by the Digital Marketing Institute. I'm your host, Will Francis, and today we'll be talking to serial entrepreneur, mentor and advisor to businesses, Maeve Kneafsey, all about building a strategy for a new business, how to go to market, grow the business effectively, and everything that entails strategically. Maeve, welcome back to the podcast. How are you doing?
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be back. I'm very well, thank you.
Good. Yes, it's great to have you back. We did speak about a year ago, something like that, I think.
Yeah. I think it's at least a year. I think so.
I think so. And since then, we've been thinking a lot about this topic and have been dying to talk to someone about it. And you're the perfect person. No pressure.
No pressure.
But yeah, people sometimes are kind of unclear about what a marketing strategy even is. So, particularly people who are new to starting a business or they're just new to business in general. So let's just start there before we get into the nitty gritty. What is a marketing strategy?
Well, marketing strategy is if you think of business goals, right? You set a goal for the overall business, whatever that goal is. It could be financial goal, it could be an audience goal. And the job of a marketing strategy is to really articulate how marketing is going to accelerate or speed up the business reaching those goals, utilizing marketing tactics. But the marketing strategy is a really high level. So, you set out, you say, okay, this is the business goals. How are we going to match it in terms of our strategy that's going to allow us to speed up the process of getting there using marketing? So I hope that explains it. It's not that complex, but people often get mixed up with planning instead of strategy. They think the two are the same. They're not.
How would you explain the difference then between planning and strategy?
So I suppose the strategy is why. Why are we doing this? What are we trying to achieve? Who's our audience? What's our product? How are we different? What's the competition? That kind of stuff. Understanding where you are within the marketplace, I suppose. And then the planning is, well, how are we going to do it? So it's much more about the tactics. But you can't do one without the other, because if you don't have the overall, what are we strategically trying to do with marketing, then you end up just kind of popping straight into tactics and you don't have an overarching understanding of what you're trying to achieve. And that can be really frustrating for people because they think, I'm doing lots, but like, why am I doing it? And what's the goal? And how can I measure it? So the overarching strategy is really important.
Yes, I often think of the sort of, I don't know why, but I think of the analogy of a boat and sailing, and the tactics is every time you put an oar in the water and all that kind of stuff, and every time you move the rudder. But if you haven't got this overall, guiding waypoint of where you're actually going and someone actually coordinating all of that so the boat actually moves and it's not just a load of splashing about in the water, then you're not actually going to get anywhere. And that's what we're trying to do, isn't it? We're trying to actually move a business somewhere, move into growth. Exactly.
It's a lovely analogy, actually. It's exactly that. I mean, if you don't know where you're going, you pop in a boat and go around in a circle. Well, what's the point? So you're absolutely right. Where are you going? Why are you going there? And then how are you going to get there?
But you know what's interesting? The way you described that initially, the marketing strategy initially, you described it as an accelerant. Kind of like, the lighter fluid on the barbecue, or something like gasoline on the barbecue or something. And actually that's true. It's an accelerant of something that should already have its own momentum, right? So by which I mean, if you've got a really great product, you're just accelerating how many people will find out about its greatness and then love its greatness and then tell other people about its greatness, right? So it all has to start with a good product. You can't market your way out of having a bad product, right? Or can you?
No, you can't. But particularly if you haven't matched up your audience properly with so if you don't understand their pain points, if you don't understand their drivers and their sensitivity around pricing, you're never going to be able to kind of just force them into doing something. Now, in older marketing, there was a style of marketing that was like, just beat the message onto the consumer's head over and over again until you create a potential need. I think that we've moved on from that. We're much, much closer. I think consumers are much more demanding and in control of the information that they want to look at. They could just flick through an ad that's annoying them. You have to have some value. So I think it is the overarching. I suppose if you think about it this way, let's say you and I launched a business tomorrow, okay? And we had a really, really good sales team. we had a good product that matched a customer need. In that scenario, the job of a marketing strategy is to make the salespeople's job much easier by accelerating the number of people who are willing to speak to them, accelerating their credibility, the number of people who are going to take them seriously. So it's all about enhancing what's there, but it can't deliver if the product and the market isn't there in the first place, the need.
Yes, indeed. And, you talk about marketing and sales. This is probably more relevant at point to B2B businesses, service businesses, something like that. But marketing isn't sales, is it? It's different, and it's kind of priming people to make the sales job easier, as you say. It's almost the way I make people feel comfortable with that is it's like pre-selling, right?
It is like pre-selling, but it's also, I always think of marketing as the door opener. I'm going to kick the door open for sales because I'm going to start priming the need.
Yeah.
And so that when the salespeople start to do their job, there's an awareness there. There's a little bit of an appetite, and it's definitely curiosity. So that's the role of marketing. Now the funny thing is, and I've talked about this with lots of people, is that the role of sales and marketing are becoming much closer. And much more tied, because let's imagine you and I have an e-commerce business. Marketing is really, in a way, driving sales. It's moving into the sales because we're in charge of the whole end-to-end user experience. So we're making sure that the website actually converts people into a sale. So we are crossing over very tightly together in that scenario. There's a much bigger responsibility of marketing to be part of revenue generation.
True, and also in B2B, marketing and sales become more merged. They draw from they probably use the same CRM system. Marketing are creating qualified leads that they're then passing on to sales. And there's probably hopefully a little bit more integration between those two functions, right?
And that's when it really works, when you've got that integration, really, really, both in terms of technology, but also culturally. That sales are passing information back through the CRM or directly to marketing that allows them to enhance their messaging. Maybe they're getting it slightly wrong, and then the salespeople say, actually, we're hearing this back. So that's a really important two-way communication that happens. And good sales teams know that if they bring intelligence back to marketing will do a better job for them. And whether that's done through automation or directly, it's just very, very important. It's a loop.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so going back to this idea of a new business, just what is the difference between a go-to-market, which often gets referred to as a GTM strategy, and just a marketing strategy?
So a go-to-market strategy is where you're breaking into a new market. It could be your brand new product or business, you're just brand new. And then a marketing strategy is probably a longer term view of what you're going to do. And it's probably grander goals for the ultimate, business dream that you have, your vision. So a go-to-market strategy is quite specific. It's how am I going to get into the market in the first place? Yeah. And then after that, I will continue my bigger strategy. It's not just market entry with a new product or a new business.
What kind of things are in there?
So market entry can be done in lots of different ways. It can be done, for example, the company I worked with, their market entry strategy was to use content of value to the audience to start trying to raise awareness. And what they did was they did a big industry survey. Okay. So it could be, for example, let's pretend we're a recruitment agency, we're brand new and we're about to launch our business. So our market entry could be, let's do some really good deep dive salary surveys and find out what people are being paid in a very specific audience that in a particular job that we really want to attract as part of our agency. We want to represent, let's say, digital marketeers. So their go-to-market strategy was to use that research as a door opener to raise awareness for themselves and also to give sales something to talk about other than the agency. So that's a go-to-market strategy. But then your overarching strategy might be far more tactics that are going to enhance your ability once you begin to raise awareness in the market of who you are.
Yes, no, I get that. So you've worked with a lot of companies on this kind of thing. What are the most common mistakes that people make, both in the go-to-market strategy, but I'll also ask you after that in their marketing strategy?
I think actually it's the same for both, Will, I think anyway, is that people think they can skip the customer discovery. You know, that they don't actually have to do research about their personas. They don't have to necessarily, or they just skip it. They get lazy with it. They think, oh, look, there's a lot of pressure sometimes in marketing to prove their value. And what sometimes people do is they just start immediately jumping into tactics. Like, let's do an email marketing campaign. Let's just get things done. And because then I feel like I'm achieving something. That's the time to just try and pull back actually and say, okay, what's the customer we're focusing on? Are we right about what their needs are? Are we right about the pain points? Does our product match it? What messaging is going to echo their pain, so that therefore they're going to want to listen to us? And people do skip that. They skip that piece, or they do it very, very light. And I mean, actually, there's a really good example. You guys won't remember, but I do. There was a Guinness launched a brand in the 1970s called Guinness Light. And what they did was they went straight in with the product and marketed it to their existing target audience, the existing consumers of Guinness.
Yeah.
Major mistake. They are not the target audience for Guinness Light. They love Guinness the way it is, and they are usually, at the time, older men in a pub, and they're going to put taste above calories. So if they had done their customer discovery properly and research, they would have realised this is not the audience that are going to convert to light Guinness. It could be females who are more concerned about calories, and therefore our strategy is going to have to be very different, so will our messaging. So that was a massive failure, and a very expensive one. So that's exactly what happens when you don't do the early part of your, and also competition. There was a lot of competition for lower calorie drinks that they had to contend with. They were very different in where they positioned themselves, and they underestimated it. So that's very specific and typical example of what happens when people skip that early piece.
But you're right, it just doesn't feel like marketing, unless you're sat there in Meta ads or Google ads or something like that, or an SEO dashboard. You don't really feel like you're doing marketing. And then researching the audience, you feel like I'm just going down rabbit holes here, and I'm wandering. I'm just wandering, and it doesn't feel as productive. I don't know. How do we get over that?
It's a mindset, and sometimes it's about, unfortunately, having to educate your stakeholders, to say, look, this is what I'm doing. Now, sometimes if I go into an organisation where you're not starting from scratch, right, and the stakeholders are going, deliver, I'll do some tactical stuff just to keep things going.
Quick wins.
But win-wins, quick wins.
Yeah, same.
But I'm saying to them, I'm selling them the concept of we need to find out more about our audience. We need to find out about the pain points. And then come back with some real tangibles, It's
a good point. I actually, I know it's not, from a purist point of view, might not be perfect, but when I ran my agency, I would actually always do that. When we went in and did a strategy piece, I'd identify quick wins and then identify the longer term things, and they would go in a strategy that we'd build, but in the meantime, we'd fix, we'd improve a conversion rate here, we'd make a campaign better here, we'd make a bit of social content better there. Quick, obvious wins, just to show that, just to reassure the client they're in good hands. They're in
things are
hands
happening.
Things are happening. They're in the hands of people who aren't just sort of stuck in PowerPoint all day, every day.
Yeah,
and actually get
absolutely.
things done. So yeah, there's a definitely helpful with that. Right, okay. So that's very interesting. So what kind? Just to dig in, what kind of things am I trying to find out about my audience here?
Well, firstly, do they care about your product? Does it solve a problem for them? Or your solution? I mean, that's fundamental. And there's in technology startups, which I know a lot of, there's a book called The Mom Test. And you can actually get videos online for the Mom Test, right? And the Mom Test is all about asking your customers, who your target customer are, about their pain and things that you could solve, but not selling your product while you're doing it, because they won't give you the honest answers. Because people always want to tell you what you want to hear. And there's a couple of reasons why. One, human beings like to please each other, right? And two, they want to get you off the phone or away from them or finish whatever this dialogue is. So, it's a way of asking and doing your research that you don't say, I've just invented a thing that holds a cucumber in the fridge. Do you need it? Well, firstly, I'm thinking, no. And secondly, I say, oh, I might. And I tick yes. Now, do you have a problem with perishable goods in your fridge is a different question. And then they will open up and talk about it. And out of that answer, you might find that there's no pain point there. So it's really about how you frame things. So at the beginning, you're really trying to find out, is this are we in the right track here? And then when you establish that, then it's okay, what's the most acute problem that we can solve for the audience? And then that's your message. That's what we're going to focus in on.
Yeah, so actually you're using the word pain point a lot there. You think that we should focus on, as the saying goes, selling painkillers, not vitamins.
Yeah, exactly, because people pay more for a painkiller than they will a vitamin.
Yeah,
something, if it's something acute and it's a problem, people will pay for it, and that's what you're trying to get at. Now, sometimes the pain point might be a little bit obtuse, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah. It's not obvious. It's not always obvious, is it? Because you think, well, I'm selling something that people just want. They don't need it. I'm just selling a faster car. There is a pain point behind that if you really dig, isn't there? The pain point is the person is a bit bummed out that they don't have the fastest car, or they don't have the coolest car on their street, or that they feel like they're driving an old banger of a car. Or so you actually, even if you dig into products that feel like they're led by desire, there is some sort of pain point back there somewhere, I often find.
You're absolutely right. Often it can be emotional drivers, not logical drivers.
True.
Why on earth do women pay a fortune for handbags? Because they feel it's going to give them something.
Still trying to work that out.
I know, it's the wrong one to bring up. Why do men spend a lot of money on golf clubs? I'm sure you don't, Will. I'm just giving you another stereotype to match the other stereotype.
Yeah, no, it's true, isn't it? And even in B2B, those emotional drivers are important, right? The kind of SaaS software services that people pick, they're not all based on logical choices. They're based on brand decisions and emotional ones, and right?
Well, wanting to belong, wanting to be seen to be smart can drive a lot of B2B decisions, and safety can be another one. So, they always say, you always buy IBM, it's safe, And I feel Salesforce, falls into that group a little bit as well. That when I've gone into organisations and I've tried to persuade them that HubSpot's better as a total package for marketing automation, I'm not selling HubSpot, I'm just taking it as an example.
Yeah.
There's a hesitation because they I want to be a Salesforce person. I want to have that in my business.
Yeah.
Because that says something about me. So, the drivers are not always logical. Now, HubSpot has changed in terms of where it was when I first was using it. So it's far more in bigger enterprises. But at the beginning it wasn't, because their market entry strategy was small businesses.
True, yeah. And there is actually talk today of Google being interested in buying HubSpot. Because of how they've grown into so many things. But yeah, it is interesting that, and yes, those very B2B led things, they have their own brand and their own sort of tribe almost.
Absolutely.
That says something about the person who chose those things.
And then if you take another product which I use, I don't know if you've seen these remarkable. They're basically, you write on them. It's electronic, but it feels like writing on paper.
Oh, Remarkable. Yeah,
Remarkable. And I have terrible handwriting. It's brilliant. I love it. But hang on. The practical part of me, that's definitely a pain point, right? I hate having loads of notebooks.
Yeah.
I've got them all over the place for meetings. I don't want to type at a meeting in front of people. I think it's rude, or they don't think you're engaged with them. There's lots of real pain points. It files everything really well. You don't have But a big part of me buying it was being part of a tribe, because a company I was working with, everybody had them.
Yeah.
So I have to be honest and say there's an element of I want one now as well. So it's nuanced. We're not black and white.
Unlike your Remarkable, we're not black and white.
Exactly, unlike my Remarkable.
Right, so let's bring this back to some of the kind of marketing theory stuff. The 4 Ps, or however many Ps there are these days: product, price, place, promotion, that kind of thing. Are they still relevant in the digital age when we're thinking about marketing strategy?
I think that they're more relevant than they ever were. I do, because it's just they're different. If you understand me, it's just different. So if you think about price, let's just talk about price. You've got to get your pricing right, because everybody can see everything online.
Yeah.
I mean, everything's available. So you're positioning for price, with some hope that people won't see that there's another solution, in China. Well, there is. They can see it. So it's so important to get the pricing right. That's my view, because online is opened up the world to the consumer and the buyer, and they can see everything. So pricing is so important, and of course the way you price is not just it's about what could you offer in terms of the way people pay you.
Yes,
that's so broad. So if you think about, do you know Very? Very is an online retailer that came out of Littlewoods.
Yeah.
And when they first came out, which I think is probably 10 years ago, they had a huge differentiator in their pricing, because what they did was they allowed people pay later.
Yes.
And pay installments. So that's probably commonplace now. But at that time, that was a real game changer for them, and it gave them an acceleration in terms of their differentiator to really, really build the market. Now, of course, everybody's caught up now, but having a differentiator,
yes,
like
it's
that
true
on pricing.
that. We certainly see that in e-commerce, haven't we, with the likes of PayPal and Klarna, allowing any e-commerce website to plug finance into the way that they sell their products. Pay later installments and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And also we're seeing the subscriptionization of so many things, and then you get different packages and tiers, and there's that whole thing about price anchoring where people will often pick the middle tier. They won't go for the cheapest or the most expensive, the middle one, and you kind of do all that thing. And so, but that again, I mean, and I'm saying this stuff because I find that very confusing as someone who's pricing the things that I do. Like, where do you start? What do people expect? How do we even find out how to price what I do, and then how to charge for it? Because it seems like there's so many different dimensions to that potentially. It's confusing.
We could have an entire podcast on pricing.
Right.
There's so many elements to it. And, look, okay, think about this. When you go into a restaurant and you buy a bottle of wine, okay, you're looking at the list. And unless you're a real wine connoisseur, you probably go for the mid-range price.
You do.
Because you don't want to be mean. You also think it's probably better than the cheaper one.
Yeah.
Now, restaurateurs know that. So they pick the wine that they want to shift and price point it that way. It's not the cheapest. It's So there. And when you're trying to figure out pricing, there's all sorts of quadrants that you have to look at. And basically, competition is one. Okay, differentiation that you believe is strong enough that's going to push people to pay a little bit more. So, for example, I'm just using HubSpot because I think everybody knows it. But when I was using it, it was the ease of onboarding. Because you could onboard yourself, you could use the product pretty much, and they have very good customer service. In contrast, at that time, if you bought Salesforce, you had to have somebody specialist to do it. So that was a big push on product, right? But also pricing. It's just, in the end of the day, it was a lot less expensive because of the fact that you could manage it yourself. So there's lots of quadrants going on in terms of people's willingness to pay a certain amount. That the product's delivering, it is a real pain point I care about. It's relative to the others. There's elements in there that are allowing you to make choices about your pricing.
Yeah.
But that's, the underpinning that is knowing your audience, understanding the market.
Yeah. Yes, understanding trying to get a handle on what are the other things they are seeing, and therefore what do they think is cheap, reasonable, and expensive. That's essentially what you're trying to work out, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because again, in my world, both in my agency days and now as someone who does kind of training and talks and stuff, you always wonder, should I just massively undercut everything out there? And I never do that, and I've never done that because you always worry that you'll then get stuck to those low prices, right? Do you agree with that? Is that a big danger, just undercutting everyone else out there?
Yes, I'll tell you a really personal example, right, that'll make it real. So when we started our agency, not to be talking about ourselves, but it is relevant.
Yeah.
We had a digital agency. We started in 2003. At that time, there wasn't very many. I think we were probably one of the first digital agencies in Ireland anyway.
Yeah.
And we had a series of different digital tactics that we sold, but the biggest piece of work we did was analytics and strategy. That was our thing. And we were reasonable. I mean, I think we were very reasonable. I would say that, wouldn't I? But we were, and we, in terms of the overall budget. But then we found that agencies who really wanted to sell, not necessarily digital marketing, but the development of websites and technology, started to give away strategy for free.
Oh.
So dropping your prices is so nuanced because it's about, well, what are my competitors doing?
Yeah.
Can I differentiate them? And that changed our whole business when that happened, because people say, well, I can get the strategy for free. So what do you do in that situation? You have to differentiate that there's something you're doing that nobody else is doing.
Yeah, no, that is true. That is very true. I think
now, you could lower your price. Will, sorry to interrupt you. You could lower your price, but add on other services once you get them in the door, and that could be your strategy. So you have other levers to pull. Let's say they start off with, okay, I'll do your digital strategy, top line level strategy. Let's pretend for free, okay, and then in implementation is where you make the money.
That's true. And that's, again, kind of what HubSpot did, right? The barrier to entry seems very low, but in reality, you'll end up paying a lot of money over the course of a subscription with them. And I think that model, it's like the freemium model in general, isn't it? It's like, I think that model has pervaded in lots of ways that this feels very easy to start, very low cost, but actually over time, your lifetime value is huge. Yeah, no, I had similar problems running an agency. I found that some of our competitors were starting to do a lot of the work in the pitch. So come up with ideas, even produce work that would normally be paid work as part of pitching to clients, or that initial unpaid bit where they're just, and that really used to annoy me. I've got to say.
I know. But if you think about, because differentiation is really important because it enables you to position yourself ahead of the competition.
Yeah.
And if you think of somebody like, everybody I hope knows budget airlines like Ryanair, okay?
True. Yeah.
So Ryanair came into the market and looked around and said, everybody's paying premium prices to get anywhere, and you can't get, the destinations are limited. So they then said, actually, our competitors are so embedded in a different way of a business model. It's completely different to ours.
Yeah.
So they disrupted the market. Now, the great thing about being a disruptor is if you've got the right disruption and you know the market needs it, which they did, everybody wants cheaper flights, right? Is that it can give you, it's a terrible pun, it can give you a bit of a runway, okay?
Nice.
Because it's very hard for the incumbents to turn their model around and try and match you.
It is, because the way their organisation is set up, they can't charge €25 for a flight.
No, they'd be out of business. So it took them so all that time, Ryanair had the runway to themselves. And then they could add value by going to a lot more different destinations that the others would never go to. They really had a lot of time to work hard. Now, when the market shifts and the other airlines start competing with you on price, then you've got to add value elsewhere.
Yeah.
And it's, so that's why understanding the market dynamics is so important for marketing strategists, because you can't sell the wrong thing the wrong way if you're not aware of what people's thinking is and what they have as an alternative to you.
One last question on price. It's a very blunt answer I'm looking for here. Is it a better mistake to be accidentally too cheap or accidentally make yourself too expensive? If I had to make that mistake, which way?
I'd go too expensive. That's my instinct.
Yeah, same. That's good.
I'd go too expensive. Always work your way down from there.
Because you can go down. You can always go down. Okay, good. So, right, let's get into putting this strategy together. Our marketing strategy, this is for a new business. What's the first step? We've talked about our go-to-market, understanding the audience, the landscape, the competition, thinking about pricing. What then are we going to work out in our long-term marketing strategy, do you think?
I suppose the first steps is define the objectives. I know this is really obvious, but it's the one, sometimes I would go in and I'll talk to a really talented marketing team. And they'll say, oh, we're doing this and we're doing this. And I say, okay, well, what's the overall goal of marketing this year? What are we trying to do? Yeah. Well, we want more sales. And I said, well, that's not enough. That's a little bit too broad. Yes, we do. That's the purpose of business. But, what exactly by how much? And in what period? Are we trying to increase it by 20% this year? Yes. Okay, grand. So how much time do we have? We've got 12 months. Right. Let's break it down. So starting very clearly with what's the overall business goal this year, and then now what are our core activities going to be that's going to deliver that? Yeah. So that's where people skip. They sometimes get a bit vague about the objective, and it's almost like people get a bit afraid of clarity. It's really important to have that clarity, because everybody can work then together, and everything comes back to the objective. So to me, that's where you start.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I train hundreds of people every month, and in most of my courses I talk about SMART objectives, right? And I actually feel kind of patronizing, and I always approach it a bit apologetically. I'm like, look, sorry, I know you've heard this if you've been on other courses, but I do have to cover this. And it turns out a surprising amount of people who, like you say, are fully fledged marketers, sometimes quite senior, working in companies, that you would think would have this stuff worked out. They don't have a very clear, specific list of objectives. It is just stuff like, well, we want to drive more sales, and as part of that, we just want to grow on TikTok or something. You're like, okay, and it doesn't work. It's just not the right foundation at all, is it?
No, and it's also very depressing for you because you need to know you're getting somewhere, right? And the only way you can do that is if you've got something specific you're aiming for.
Yeah.
So and it's not demotivating. You say, okay, well, and also I think it helps you make choices more quickly, because if you say, somebody says, look, this is a really good idea. There's a new thing called TikTok.
Yeah.
Let's go on it. And okay, what's involved? And that's the wrong question. It's not what's involved. Will it actually help us reach our goal? The main overarching goal, is it going to help us towards that 20% increase in revenues? Okay, it is. Okay, well, explain to me how. Because we'll either say yes or no.
Absolutely. Every decision can be guided by that really simply, can't it? And you don't have to have big meetings about a decision. It's like, does it help us get to our goals? No, then we're not doing it.
And also resources are relevant, because if you say, okay, look, TikTok's brilliant, it could deliver uptake or increase in revenues, but do we have time to do it if we're doing this thing over here that we're doing, which is our email marketing campaigns? Do we have time to do both? I'm not saying it's that simple a choice, but sometimes it is, and you say, well, we can't actually do both this year. We're resource limited, and we'll do TikTok next year.
Yeah, it's true. Well, you know what? We're getting into the sort of, I suppose, the slightly getting into the politics of it and the kind of human side of this. I mean, I'm thinking about soft skills here, or these more human skills.
Yeah.
Yes, okay, we need to know about strategy, we need to be experienced marketers, but to get people to buy into objectives or even talk about them, think about them and agree to the need for that clarity, there's people skills involved there. And obviously then as you build and implement a strategy, again, you're getting buy-in from other people, you're trying to keep people cooperating with you. So what do you think are the most important soft skills, or I like to call them human skills, that are good to possess and develop as a marketer who wants to build and implement a strategy?
I love that question, because it's never asked, actually, very rarely asked. I think empathy is really important from a person in marketing, because your job is to get into the shoes of other people. And the quicker and better you are at doing that, the more effective you're going to be in terms of knowing what they need. Okay, so and also if you're going to be doing customer journey mapping, empathy is a really underrated tool in your toolkit, because you have to think about them and be them. So I do think empathy is really important. The other one is, if you're selling your ideas to stakeholders, you have to also be in their shoes, because everybody has their priorities and their things that they want to achieve, and it's not going to be the same as yours. But if you can talk back to them in articulating how you'll help them get to where they need to go, that's going to make it much easier for you. So, and then that leads to communication. And communication is such a woolly word. What does that mean? Simple, plain English, not using buzzwords. If you're going to use terminology, use it the language of the person you're trying to persuade, not the marketing buzzwords, which just firstly put people off, and secondly, they don't often understand them. So it's really, using proper communications to reflect the person you're talking to, either actually talking to or communicating with, online. So that would be one. And then, of course, creativity, being able to come up with novel ways of doing something within a budget. That's really important, clever ways. That company who did the research as their market entry, that's creative, really understands where people are, that everybody's obsessed with how much they're getting paid compared to everybody else, and it's a clever and innovative way to enter a market. Or if you think of Airbnb, the way they brought in Airbnb Live It. So they got people in the local areas to be the insider tour to what it's like to live in Madrid. Find out the places where I'm not going to say this right, people from Madrid, is it Madridians? Anyway, where the people
Madrileños.
That's the one. See, that's why I didn't say it. Like, we follow people wearing holidays to see where they're getting their coffee that are locals. So Airbnb understood that. And then, so you get the insider tips on the locality from locals. You know, that's innovative and creative and thinking outside the box, which is an overused word, but it's actually true. Don't just do the same thing everybody else does.
Yes, that creativity, doing a lot with a little is where you're getting creative, isn't it? You're not just going out there splurging money. You're trying to always do a lot with a little. Whether that's a little money, a little time, a little resource. Yeah, interesting. So those are some... And is there a, you know, for every marketer, is there an element of what we might call leadership? Because you're essentially saying, this is the strategy and I need everyone to get behind this, and you sort of, that call to arms to get behind it.
Yeah, I mean, I think leadership is about communication, isn't it? And everybody understanding, what we're trying to do at a higher level, and then the important role each person plays in getting there, and then being able to feed back how it's going and where it's going and how you're going to help them do better and facilitate them. So that's one area where you're leading your team, right? But then the other area is that you have to make sure you represent marketing in the organization. Marketing has got to be seen to be at this important element within the business, and your job is to convince other stakeholders that is the case. So leadership in understanding how you can help the business reach the goals, how you make sure everybody else understands the responsibility you're taking on, and that you're willing to do that, and then get their help when you need it. So if sales understand what you're trying to do, that's really important, and they will help you, because they say, well, they're going to help us get our sales. So that good communication and showing leadership across the organization as well.
Yes, it's true that. Yeah, very true. I think it's about getting people to trust you. I do think you're right about that clear communication. I think if you come across as like a sort of a bit of a jargony person, then people don't quite trust you. Whereas if you come across as very open, very transparent, and I suppose likable, there's a lot of ways that people... You can build that trust, and then people they're bought into pretty much anything you do, really, because they assume that it must be good because they trust you.
Yeah, I suppose that when I was younger, I always thought I had to have all the answers. That's what a good leader is.
True.
Have all the answers.
Yeah.
And that's a terrible place to put yourself, because you don't, and nobody does. So I think you can get trust from people by being honest with them about when you're struggling as well. You say, look, I don't know I don't understand this audience. I don't really, or I've tried this and it's not working. Why do you think it's not working? And that you can get, once you get that dialogue going, they'll come to you.
Yes, absolutely.
And then you suddenly change the dynamic.
Well, that brings me on to my next question, really, about getting help, because ultimately you can't... A lot of marketers feel under pressure to go away, craft the perfect marketing strategy and come back and present it. And that's a horrible feeling. I would hate to have to do that now. Because I've been in that position, and actually it was never a position that I or anyone should be in. It should be something you start out by just, like you say, being open about. I don't currently know how I'm going to put this together. I'm going to find out, and I'm going to sort of research my way through it. But if anybody would like to help me with that, I would really appreciate it. And I want to learn from everybody around me, and having that kind of, like you say, not trying to be the know-it-all. So if I'm struggling with a marketing strategy, what kind of people might I reach out to around me?
I mean, I reach out to people all the time. I'm a terrible reacher-outer in the sense that people really do help. So I suppose I might know somebody else who's a colleague somewhere else in another business. They might have a similar role to me. I might ring them. I definitely use online a lot, to find free information, because it's some really good stuff out there. The Digital Marketing Institute, I believe, is a very good organisation as well. I'd probably look at them, in fact.
No, they do have some really good resources, yeah.
I always talk to product people as well. I find they're interesting because they see things in a different way. And often the product people get to go to a lot of the trade fairs, a lot of stuff that's happening. And they're kind of cutting edge sometimes about what's going on. And they might see stuff. And I'd say to them before they go to anything, by the way, when you're over there, I know you're looking at products, but would you have a look and see what other people are doing in terms of marketing? If there's anything tricky or clever, will you take a photograph of it or video it or whatever? They're fantastic. And then I've always had a mentor, somebody I can bounce off. and I don't always say you're officially my mentor, but it becomes somebody who I will trust and go to with problems or
Yes.
ideas.
That's good. I suppose you do have these unofficial mentors, don't you, that you don't really call your mentor. That's good, actually. That's it in itself is good advice. Because we've had people on the podcast before saying you need a mentor. It is quite hard to go and ask someone, will you be my mentor? Like, can I call you my mentor?
It's a bit like, will you be my boyfriend?
Totally, yeah. Can I call you my girlfriend now? Anyway. Right, very interesting. I should mention that you did an earlier webinar with us about how the marketing team can get buy-in, and we're going to put a link to that in the show notes of this episode.
Fantastic. I hope
that
it's
was
useful.
very good, what the stuff you talked about there. Right, okay, so the product team, absolutely, they're going to be the people that understand product more than anyone. Sales team, I suppose, got to talk to them as we've talked about. Online resources.
So right.
Yeah. Anyone else you'd sort of reach out to?
Yeah, I actually go out with the sales team. I mean, look, I know this may be really obvious, maybe it's not, but
no, it's not.
The sales team are brilliant. If you go out with them and you hear what the customers are saying back to them, particularly if it's a relatively new customer rather than a catch up with somebody you love, because you really begin to see and also you're going to read the feedback from the customer differently than they are. I mean, when I was in sales, your objective is to get as close to the end as quick as possible, right?
Yeah.
But when a marketing person comes in and sits with you, they're going to think and ask different questions, and they can be really insightful.
It's true that. Yeah, God, I wish more marketing people would do that. Go along to some of those other meetings and get out of their marketing box a little bit. I think that would help everyone. I think we'd all be more effective. To be honest, I wish I had done more of that in my time, for sure. Okay, and like I say, we will link to the webinar, but just give us a few of the things that you talked about, maybe a couple of the tips that you mentioned when you're trying to get that buy-in from maybe skeptical stakeholders around a strategy.
I think the one thing is, I know it's language. Don't be saying things like hits and we get really good traffic on the website. That doesn't mean anything. It's not tangible enough to somebody. So you reflect their goals. You're trying to raise, let's say we go back to the revenue one. You're trying to increase revenue by 20% this year. Okay. These are the ways we can help you get there. But it has to be, again, very plain English, simple. And these are where we think we'll have challenges. The other one is to, I suppose, understand that what marketing is doing in all the detail of what we do is not interesting. It is to us. But all the different tactics that we're doing, often other stakeholders are just don't get it. And it's not your job, and not their job to understand all the nuances. So just be aware of that. And then the other thing is that it's often really useful to use data, particularly if that person is a data person, as a way to get buy-in.
Yeah.
So I'm making something up, but you could say millennials, 40,000 million photographs a day. And if you think of Coke, remember Coca-Cola did those branded bottles with the name, personalized name on them.
Yeah.
And the Coke, more senior people in Coke were not really convinced. So they didn't understand the whole millennial, let's take a photograph with my bottle and the name. So they did a small skirmish campaign. It worked really well. So prototyping or skirmish campaigns where you go in and you try something and you get results and bring them back, that can really help you win over people.
Oh, interesting. So they just did a small scale, perhaps in one few shops or one city or something with just names on the bottles and cans. Oh, interesting. Yeah. And then I do think that's a really, really good tip. Prove it at a small scale. Just try it with a couple of social posts if you want to prove the campaign idea or how small can you test it?
Yeah, and the thing is that digital's our best friend, isn't it? Because you can test things in a really small number. You can really segment the market. I had an idea at one stage for a business, and I just used landing pages to test the market. Google AdWords and landing pages.
Nice, yeah.
And it worked. The idea was, I thought, a brilliant idea. It was for designer post boxes, because all the post boxes that you put outside your house now look exactly the same. But anyway, the price point was very sensitive in the tests we did.
Yeah.
So that was a way to kind of really test something quickly, understand the limit people were willing to go in terms of how much they'd spend, and then the number that we got interested
That's
in the
good.
first place.
Yeah, you're right. Paid ads and landing pages are a very good way to test that, right? You know, if you want to know how a few hundred people would respond to this price or that price, it doesn't cost a lot to run that campaign, does it? You know, just to try, and then no one else is going to see that other than the people targeted by the ads. So you can show stuff that you never want people to see in future.
Yes.
Right.
Another thing, just because I'm thinking about, I've forgotten this, Will, one of the things that works really well with other stakeholders in a business is competitor analysis. Really understanding the competitor and bringing some intelligence back, because people will listen. You know, if you come back and say, look, our competitors they're adding a whole lot of extras onto the product and it's free.
Yeah.
Our competitors are accessing the market through schools. The competitors have dropped their prices. You know, that, and of course, you can't just say the fact. You think, this is what I think is happening. This is how we could respond. And I think that always gets they're always listening ears start to come into play. So keep a good tight eye on the competitor as well.
Oh, it's true that it's not quite FOMO, but it's something very similar, isn't it? That it's a trigger for people. If their competitors are doing it, it must be worth paying attention to. So yeah, that's right. You can use that, definitely. So you working with lots of different clients in your time. Have you seen any particularly creative approaches to developing strategy that you've not mentioned already?
Yeah, I mean, look, a lot of them are around the value that they bring in addition to the marketing, if you like. So for example, there's a company called The Sill, which is a plant shop. Sill, as in
nice.
The sill for your plant. And they will do free online workshops about, you know, how to fix my house plants.
Nice.
You know, how do you deal with rubber plant sickness? I'm making it up. I have no idea if rubber plants get sick. I'm sure they do. You know, if I want to make my ferns grow longer. And they do all that for free. And that's really novel and clever because there isn't somebody doing that. So I think those kind of tactics. And then I think the Airbnb example is very clever, where they have a lot of people who are local giving free information about the locality where somebody's staying, giving them tips and insight into what's, you know, where's the best place for coffee. You know, is there a tapas place that nobody else knows about behind the cathedral? You know, that kind of thing. Hackathons are an interesting way. I mean, you can do them, non-tech companies can do them where you bring a bunch of people who could be influencers into a room to try and break something or kind of pull something apart. And that can be really great because you get product information, but also they begin to have care enough about your product now because they're part of the team. You've brought them in. So
to test your product to its limits.
Yeah.
In some way. Yeah, that's interesting for sure. Yeah.
Can they break it?
It's funny actually. There's a lot of examples of that. I think influencers being brought in as part of product development, not always in tech companies, as you say. You know, seen that in fashion and beauty. Glossier are a company we've done a case study of in the past. An American beauty brand, and a lot of their products are based on basically feedback from customers, having these kind of influencer focus groups and what have you. And you're right, people actually love to be invested in better products because people want better products. They want to be part of their tribe getting their hands on better products. You know,
exactly.
It's amazing actually how willing they are. I think people would be surprised.
I mean, sometimes the tactics, you've seen it done by companies where they give a preview to a product to a very small select bunch of people. You know, that is incredible in the impact because then they all feel they have to talk about it. Yeah. You know, because they've been given access. So you can build up cleverly build up a sense of mystery and exclusivity, and that can really work in terms of helping you market, particularly with influencers. Indeed.
Well, look, it's come time to ask me the question. It's come time to ask you the question. I ask all of our guests, what are your top tips? And specifically, I would love to ask you what your top 5 tips are when crafting a marketing strategy.
Do you know, I thought about this because I knew you were going to ask me, so I have them here ready to go.
Good.
Okay. I'm going to repeat stuff we've all talked about anyway. So
that's all right. A lot of the time, when guests do their top 5 tips, it's recapping and crystallizing some of the stuff we've talked about. That's absolutely normal. So go for it.
Okay, well, goals. Have the goals really, really clear, okay? And don't be afraid of them, So goals, clarity, what are we doing? Then figure out your audience and get deep with the audience. Really profile the audience. Make sure that even if it's bad news you're bringing back to the company, let's say you do an audience deep dive into the target audience and you find, I don't think we're matching the audience. Well, you know what? The alternative is to keep going and spend lots of money and get nowhere. So if you come back and say, look, I don't think it's the right pain point, you have a few choices there, right? You can find another audience who do have the pain point, or you adjust the product. But either way, it's really important work to do at the early stages. Do your personas really as early as you can, because you can always update them. Yep. Once you've got any set of data, you can update them. But in the beginning, do the personas, get them right, and because it'll help you then know exactly what the messaging should be.
Yeah.
And it'll also help you know what the tactics are going to be, because the persona will tell you how they behave and where they are anyway. So it's so important. And if you're doing an online offering, I think the customer journey map early on is really important, because you need to find out where they might be getting tripped up. The ooches, oh, you can't use a credit card here, or, it's very hard to see what I bought last time, things like that. But the journey mapping can really, really help with that.
What we talking about there, finding people's objections, or are we finding the point they sort of drop out of the journey to purchase? What do you mean exactly?
Yeah, I mean, in a customer journey map, you're doing everything from you're mapping out all the touch points where the customer is engaging with you in some way.
On their way to actually converting.
On their way to a purchase. And post-purchase as well. So it could be, they get onto your website and it's too slow downloading. Yeah. Or it's not clear where you buy, or it's not clear where there's information that can help.
You're trying to find out where's the leak. Where am I leaking customers?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Pipeline. Or it could be you don't include pricing on your site, and that's really bugs people. People really hate that. So it's kind of walking all the way through the journey of our customer till purchase, and then actually post-purchase. How do we take care of them?
Yeah.
Did it get delivered on time?
Yeah.
Did they give us feedback? Would they buy from us again? So it's mapping out that whole journey and seeing if there's any pain points along the way. So for example, you can have a really good online, or let's say you're brilliant at selling, okay, in a shop, whatever it is, but then when it comes to the till, you can't open the till. That's the problem. That's the pain point, and it could be on a site that it's very difficult to actually enter your information and pay.
Okay, cool. So goals, personas, customer journey mapping. What else?
Tactics. Don't be afraid to adapt them. You can do what I call them skirmishes. You can try things and see if they worked.
Yes.
It's much more agile. It's not like, that's what we're going to do for your end of story. It isn't. You're going to do maybe 5 core things, and you're going to adapt based on the results you get. And also setting KPIs, key performance indicators for the tactics themselves. So you have an overarching goal, but then you have different tactics that you're doing, and you want to say, okay, look, let's say where email marketing is one of our important campaign tactics. Last year we got our average open rate was this, and our conversion rate was this. This year we're going to go for that much better. So you always have to have context, except when you're starting in the greenfield. What did we do before, and what are we going to do better?
Yes.
Otherwise, you just feel like you're just a hamster in a wheel. Just keep doing stuff.
Yeah, so always benchmark against your previous performance.
Yeah, and if you don't have previous performance, try and find out what the industry benchmarks are.
Yes. Yep. Which are usually available through a bit of Googling.
Yeah, or ChatGPT.
Indeed. Oh, great! And that's that. There they are. 5 great tips. We did cover the 5, right?
I think we did, yeah.
Yeah. Yes, 5 very good tips there, Maeve. Thank you so much for your time. I feel like I've learnt a lot. I feel much more ready to create my go-to-market strategy and my long-term marketing strategy. One final question before I let you go, of course. Where can listeners connect with you online?
You can connect with me on LinkedIn. That would be probably the easiest way for you to connect with me. Or you
Good stuff.
That's probably the easiest way. That's where I am online, is LinkedIn.
Yes, good. Well, we'll connect with you there. And look, thanks again for your time. It's been great. Cheers, Maeve.
Thank you very much.